What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a meta-analysis for the July 2019 format. This past weekend saw the conclusion of the World Championship qualifiers with the European WCQ. And unless you're qualified for the World Championship, this pretty much brings the 2018-2019 season to a close. But there is still one other event you can attend, and that is the Pro Play Games Tour event in Richmond, Virginia, taking place on July 13th and 14th. There's a $2,000 prize pool up for grabs. You don't need any other prior qualifications other than paying that $20 registration fee. I'll be there doing commentary for the live stream, and it's going to be an absolutely good time. So check out the link in the description if you're going to be in the area to attend, and I hope to see you guys there. But today I'm going to be covering what happened at the European World Championship qualifier, just to give us an indication of what the format's going to look like for the foreseeable future. We do have sets coming out like Battles of Legend, Heroes, Revenge, as well as Rising Rampage in July. So this is going to kind of set the precedent moving into this month, and then we're going to see how these other sets are going to affect the meta moving forward. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I want to kick things off by showing you guys the evolution of one of these large scale events, starting with day one, all 1900 plus competitors at the European World Championship qualifier, and then showing the progress and how the decks started to dwindle down as we got closer and closer to the top cut. So to kick things off, here is the overall deck breakdown for the European WCQ. Shouts to Carlancho Store for providing all of these graphics as always. And as you can see, Salomon Great was taking up close to like 25% of this entire field of players, which means that you had like a 1 in 4 shot of going up against Salomon Great at this event. That is just absolutely crazy to see the breakdown like this, because yeah, there's obviously going to be that significant number of rogue decks in that other category, but at the same time, there's still plenty of other decks that are going to be competing. It's just really crazy to see Salomon Great taking up that large of a representation in the overall field of players. Not to mention you've got the other strong tier 1 contenders like Orcus coming in at second place. Then you had stuff like Sky Striker. I think you had Danger Thunder Dragon as well. And then you had the more tier 2 roguish decks, and then you kind of just tapered off into the remaining other category. Now moving into day 2, you're going to start to see a little bit of a shift, because with the remaining about 500 players or so that made it to day 2, this is what the breakdown looked like. And now Salomon Great has actually moved from having 25% representation to over a third, meaning that the likelihood of going up against Salomon Great on day 2 was like a 1 in 3 shot, which is absolutely ridiculous. You also see that Orcus started to have a higher representation as well. Then there was also stuff like Sky Striker and Thunder Dragon, which held about the same representation in terms of conversion going from day 1 to day 2. And this is where you start to see a lot of those other roguish decks fall off as we get closer to the top cut. And now what you guys are looking forward to the most, here is the top 64 breakdown for the European World Championship qualifier. And this really should not come as a surprise at this point. I mean, Salomon Great, as we saw, just continuing to dominate not only the European WCQ, but also the North American, South American, Central American, just every WCQ. Salomon Great has just been tearing it up. I'm pretty sure Salomon Great actually has won every single WCQ this season except for North America, which had Danger Thunder Dragon winning it. So that just goes to show the prowess and the power of Salomon Great this format, being able to just take some of the highest caliber of events of the entire year. So as you can see, Salomon Great is just dominating. I mean, this really, again, is no surprise. Sky Striker had the second highest representation going into the top cut, which, again, isn't shocking, but it's interesting to see how Orcus was kind of the front runner leading into this, and then Sky Striker ended up having the higher conversion rate when it actually did get down to the top 64, and then it was shortly followed by the other tier 1 decks being Orcus as well as Danger Thunder Dragon. What's very interesting to me here is that Altergeist had a very significant representation in this top 64. I think there was like 7 Altergeist decks, which actually tied in representation to that of Danger Thunder Dragon, which is crazy. I mean, it's not really a surprise because we saw at the prior nationals that Altergeist was able to win one of these events, and maybe Europe is just really on the Altergeist hype train here, but I think it's just absurd to see this many Altergeists popping up at such a high tier competitive level of that of a WCQ. I mean, we do know that Europe does favor a more control style compared to us here in North America, which likes to go a lot more aggressive and combo heavy, but still, seeing Altergeist have that high of a representation was really surprising to me, even though I touted as being a solid tier 2 deck at the moment, it's still crazy to see this many doing that well. Now, since Salomon Great had such an amazing record over the course of the WCQ season, I figured it'd be appropriate to kick things off with the first place Salomon Great list. And looking at this list, it really isn't too different from what you're used to. I mean, there's a little bit of a lesser hand trap count with 2 Phantasme, 2 Ogre. We see 2 Jack Jaguar, which is very interesting. Maybe he's wanting to play around stuff like DD Crow or Call by the Grave potentially as well. Or I guess Jack Jaguar isn't like the worst normal summon. It's also level 4 to help facilitate Abyss Dweller. But then we also have the fact that we see 2 copies of Will of the Salomon Great. This is a card that actually fell out of favor in Salomon Great for quite some time. But during the WCQ's progression, we actually saw Will of the Salomon Great start to be re-included in this strategy. And I think having a built-in soul charge is really not a bad thing to have access to. We also see 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, definitely wanting to go after not only Mystic Mind decks, but also just having that 1-for-1 spot removal with stuff like Orcus Crescendo, with Salomon Great Roar for the mirror match, stuff like multi-roll, or maybe specific targets in the Sky Striker matchup. Cosmic Cyclone is just a very good all-around purpose card, but also the fact that it banishes the card means that there's not going to be any sort of recursion, and I think that was a very solid call. So congrats to him. He also did play the package of Transcode Talker and the Update Jammer, in addition to having the Fusion of Fire in the main deck, so that way he could have 2 ways to OTK the opponent in case one of those ways got stopped. And we saw the power of Transcode Talker plus Update Jammer in his feature match up against Trickstar, I believe in the top 32, and definitely check out that match if you guys didn't see it live. Now, Sky Striker had the 2nd highest representation, and so I figured I would go ahead and show you guys a sample list from that as well. So here's a top 32 Sky Striker list. Keep in mind, I'm bringing this to you guys the day after the WCQ, so not all of the lists are readily available. But one thing that was interesting was that there was actually a fair amount of players opting to play a Ghost 2nd variant of Sky Striker for this event, and this could be one of them. The fact that there's a main deck Pancratops could be indicative of the fact that this is going 2nd Striker, but Pancratops is just a very solid card in your control-based matchups, regardless of if you go 1st or 2nd, but if you go 1st, Pancratops doesn't really do a whole lot, so that's why I'm kind of favoring that this would be a Ghost 2nd build. But we saw several Ghost 2nd builds on stream as well, and I think that's what's really neat about Sky Striker, because I can play either way. We also see 3 copies of Mystic Mine in this build as well, which can just auto-win the Danger Thunder Dragon matchup, especially going 1st, maybe even Orcust as well, and I think a lot of the Sky Striker decks were opting to go for the Mystic Mine route, just to have that protection, make the other decks play their game, and steal some wins if the opponent doesn't have an out. Now, Danger Thunder Dragon had huge representation at the North American WCQ, but didn't have nearly as much favor at the European one. So I'm gonna go and show you guys a couple lists. Here's the first one that actually managed to make the Worlds playoffs on Friday, and again, this is very similar to what we've seen in North America, playing a small Crusadia package, kind of just bolstering the consistency of how explosive this deck can be. But then there was also a variant of this deck that basically played a lot heavier of a Crusadia engine, but just cut all the Thunder cards entirely, so it's more just like Crusadia Danger, but it's cool because it can do a lot of the same plays. You just don't have access to Colossus, but being able to play more starters in the form of the Crusadia cards is actually pretty cool to see. So I'm gonna have that list up for you guys to see here as well. I think one of my favorite decks to see of this event was a Lunalight Danger deck that managed to make the top 32. We have not seen this deck probably since like Raphael Neven won YCS Chicago back in February. It's been like popping up here and there at regionals, but really not doing anything whatsoever. So I think it was really awesome to see this deck popping up once again. Here's a sample of an Altergeist list that managed to make the top 64. Again, just to show you guys what the Altergeist players have kind of been theorizing and give you some food for thought. And then lastly, here is a Pendulum Zephyr list that managed to make the top 64 as well. This is taking advantage of the Endymion cards, the Zephyr card, just being able to amass just some utterly absurd boards going 1st and being able to break those boards very easily going 2nd. Being a Pendulum deck, there's actually quite a bit of variety in this top cut, even though it was still heavily dominated by the 4 tier 1 decks. Now I want to wrap up this video with one last deck list, and that is a day 2 deck list for Nekroz. Now, Nekroz is one of those decks that you always have to be on the lookout for because it has been able to do well before. I believe it got day 2 at the UDS here in Las Vegas back in March, and it's always seeming to be lurking around and doing something because you've got powerful cards in Unicorn being able to stun like the entire meta, and then you also have the combination of Vanity's Ruler because you have like the incantations. You can just drop this, your opponent can't special summon, and it really just puts a damper on their ability to play the game. So congrats for making it that far. Maybe Nekroz will make it to these top cuts cuts one of these days, but I still think it's really cool to see Necroz doing as well as it can in 2019. Now, there's one thing I want to discuss before wrapping up this video, and that is the new end of match procedures. I guess they're not really new anymore because we've had them for about the better part of a year, and the thing is, I think enough time has elapsed that it's time to take a look back and reevaluate these rules, because I don't think they are healthy for the game. The reason I say that is because how many matches, or especially feature matches, that we've had the opportunity to witness have been lost because of these new end of match procedures, and no one feels good winning because of these end of match procedures. No one definitely feels good losing under these new procedures, and I think it's time that we change this. Why can't we just go from the end of the current phase to the end of the turn? No player should be having to frantically play out their cards in a matter of 10 seconds to just have the opportunity to win a game that could have been won, when it doesn't have to be this way, because then you've got communication discrepancies and players trying to activate effects, or players purposely trying to stall for time, or you've got, you know, just the communication issue with like what phase it is, or maybe, you know, just there's so many things that could possibly go wrong and so many toxic elements here that just by making a simple change from end of phase to end of turn could help alleviate a lot of these issues. And in the grand scheme of these large tournaments, it would barely add any extra time onto each round. So I think for the better of the game, let's go ahead and reevaluate these end of match procedures for the better, so 2019 to 2020 season can be a lot more fun. So guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.